The rain fell softly outside the little corner cafe, tapping against the wide glass windows like an impatient metronome counting down the minutes of his waiting heart. Daniel Hayes sat alone at the table near the window, his black coat draped neatly over the back of the chair, his watch glinting faintly under the warm cafe lights. The place smelled of roasted coffee beans, vanilla syrup, and something bittersweet, like expectation and regret blended in the air. He looked down at his phone again. 7:45 p.m. She was supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. He'd rehearsed this moment in his mind since morning, how he'd smile, how he'd crack a light joke, how he'd finally tell himself that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't done with him yet. The blind date had been set up by his sister, who swore this woman was different, kind, warm, and someone who understands pain. Daniel had laughed when she said that, but secretly he hoped it was true. After losing his wife 3 years ago in a car accident, Daniel hadn't been able to open his heart again. Tonight, though, he wanted to try. The cafe door chimed softly each time someone entered, and each time his eyes lifted, his pulse skipping just a little, only to fall back into stillness when it wasn't her. The waitress passed by again, smiling kindly. "Still waiting for your date, sir?" she asked. He forced a polite smile. "Yeah, I guess so." She nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes the right person's just running late," she said before walking off. Daniel gave a soft chuckle. Maybe she was right. Maybe the woman was stuck in traffic, or maybe she was having second thoughts. Maybe, "Excuse me," a tiny voice cut through the quiet hum of the cafe. Daniel looked up, startled. Standing beside his table was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, with bright hazel eyes, curly brown hair pulled into 2 uneven ponytails, and a pink coat that looked a size too big. She clutched a small white paper bag in her hands, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold outside. Daniel blinked, confused. "Hi there," he said gently, "are you lost?" The little girl shook her head. "No, mister. My mommy's sorry she's late." For a heartbeat, Daniel just stared at her, words caught in his throat. "Your mommy?" The girl nodded seriously, setting the paper bag on the table. "She told me to tell you she's really sorry. She said she'll be here soon, but she didn't want you to be lonely." Then, with the casual innocence only a child could have, she slid into the seat across from him and smiled. "So I came instead." Daniel didn't know whether to laugh or call someone. "You came, instead of your mom?" "Yup," the girl said, opening the paper bag and pulling out 2 cookies shaped like stars. "She said you might like these. They're from the bakery near the park." She pushed one toward him. "They're my favorite." "So," Daniel said gently, leaning forward with a small smile tugging at his lips, "what's your name, kiddo?" The little girl perked up immediately, proud to introduce herself. "Lila," she said, swinging her legs beneath the chair. "Lila Rose Bennett." She said it with such confidence that Daniel chuckled softly. "That's a beautiful name, Lila Rose Bennett." The girl beamed. "Thank you. Mommy says roses are strong and pretty, just like girls should be." Daniel nodded. "She sounds like a very smart lady." Lila grinned wider. "She is. She makes me pancakes that look like animals. I made a dinosaur once, but Mommy said it looked more like a potato." Daniel laughed, the sound light and genuine for the first time in months. Something about this little girl's energy filled the empty chair, and maybe even the emptiness he'd been pretending wasn't there. Lila looked around the cafe, fascinated by everything, the soft music, the shelves of coffee beans, the flickering candle on the table. "This place smells like hugs," she said suddenly. Daniel blinked, surprised. "Like hugs?" She nodded. "Warm and nice. My mommy says smells can hold memories. Do you have a smell that makes you remember something?" Daniel's heart clenched. He thought about the scent of cinnamon and jasmine, his late wife, Emily, had loved baking in the mornings. Yeah, he said quietly. Cinnamon. It reminds me of someone special. Lila smiled softly, her big eyes somehow understanding more than her age allowed. Then cinnamon must be your heart smell. Before he could answer, the cafe door chimed again. Daniel's head snapped up instinctively, expecting to see a woman rushing in, maybe holding a coat and an apologetic smile. But no one came toward him. A group of teenagers entered, laughing loudly, then disappeared into a corner booth. He sighed quietly, turning back to Lila. She was dunking her cookie into her milk like this was her usual evening routine. Do you come here often? He asked jokingly. Lila giggled. No, silly. Mommy said this is a special night. She said tonight might be the start of a happy story. Daniel raised an eyebrow. A happy story, huh? And what kind of story do you think it'll be? Lila thought for a moment, then smiled dreamily. The kind where lonely people smile again. The simplicity of her answer hit him like a whisper from the universe. He felt his throat tighten. That's a very good kind of story, Lila, he said softly. Yeah, she said, nodding with the wisdom of an old soul, but sometimes stories take time to start. Like pancakes, they're all mushy at first, but if you wait, they turn golden and yummy. Daniel laughed again, shaking his head. You're something else, you know that? Mommy says that too, she replied proudly. Minutes turned into nearly half an hour. The clock ticked past 8:20. Still no sign of Lila's mother. Daniel started to feel concerned. Hey, Lila, he said carefully, are you sure your mom's okay? Lila looked up at him. Shiny? Daniel echoed, leaning forward as the little girl, Lila, swung her legs under the table, her small shoes tapping rhythmically against the wooden chair. She nodded earnestly, her hazel eyes glowing under the soft cafe lights. Yeah. Mommy says some people are shiny, like they sparkle all the time, like stars in movies or the ladies in fancy dresses. But she says she's not shiny anymore, just tired shiny. The innocence in her tone twisted something inside Daniel's chest. And what do you think? He asked gently. Lila's face lit up with certainty. I think Mommy's the prettiest person in the whole wide world. Even when she cries. Daniel's heart gave a quiet ache. He didn't know what to say, so he smiled, soft and genuine. I bet she is. Before he could ask more, the door chimed again. This time, a woman rushed in, her hair slightly damp from the rain, cheeks flushed, coat too big for her slender frame. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room, and when her eyes landed on Lila and Daniel, she froze. Daniel stood instinctively. Lila jumped down from her seat, waving excitedly. Mommy! I told him you were sorry. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, embarrassment flooding her face. She hurried over. Lila! Oh sweetheart, you can't just. She stopped mid-scold when she looked up at Daniel properly for the first time. Their eyes met, and something like recognition flickered between them. I am so sorry, she said, her voice breathless. My babysitter cancelled last minute, and I didn't want to. It's okay, Daniel interrupted gently, his tone calm and sincere. She kept me great company. Lila beamed. See, Mommy? I did good. The woman, her name, as Daniel would soon learn, was Grace Bennett, smiled down at her daughter, relief and warmth flooding her features. You did wonderful, baby, she whispered, kissing her forehead before turning back to Daniel. I'm Grace, she said softly. And, thank you for being so kind to her. I can't imagine how strange this must have been. Daniel smiled faintly. Actually, it was the best part of my day. Grace blinked, taken aback by his sincerity. She sat down slowly, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. I'm really sorry for being late, she said again, fiddling with the napkin. I almost cancelled. She hesitated. Wasn't sure I was ready for this. Daniel nodded. Neither was I, he admitted. But then a little girl walked in and told me stories about pancakes and hearts that smell like cinnamon. Grace's eyes widened, then softened. Oh no, she whispered. She told you that? He chuckled. She did. She's quite the philosopher. Grace smiled, shaking her head in disbelief. She's everything. I wasn't going to bring her, but she insisted. Said she wanted to meet the man who makes mommy smile when she talks about him. Daniel's heart stuttered. She said that? Grace blushed faintly, looking down. Yeah. I didn't think she was listening. For a moment, they sat there. Daniel exchanged a glance with Grace, who shrugged sheepishly. You first, Lila said, pointing to him. Daniel thought for a moment, his fingers brushing the warm mug. Okay, he said softly. When I was little, my dad used to take me fishing every summer. I remember the sound of the lake, so quiet, like it was listening. Lila clapped her hands. That's a good one. Then she turned to her mom. Your turn, Mommy. Grace smiled, though her eyes shimmered faintly. When you were born, she said to Lila, voice trembling. The doctor said you were the loudest baby they'd ever heard. I remember thinking, she's going to fill my world with sound. Daniel's heart squeezed again. Lila giggled. That's easy. My happy memory is right now. She squeezed both their hands. Because you both look happy. The cafe seemed to quiet in that instant, like time paused to witness something small but beautiful forming. Grace blinked back tears and laughed softly. You're impossible, you know that? That's what you always say. Lila replied, grinning. They spent the next hour talking. Grace told him about her job as a freelance illustrator, how she used to paint before her husband left when Lila was only 2. How she'd almost given up on dating because it felt too exhausting to pretend she was okay. Daniel listened, really listened, and found himself smiling without realizing it. Grace wasn't shiny, no. She was real, the kind of person whose light came from surviving storms, not from pretending they never existed. When the clock neared 10, Lila yawned dramatically. Mommy, can we go home? My eyes are sleepy. Grace nodded, gathering her things. Of course, baby. She turned to Daniel. Thank you again, for tonight. I'm sorry it didn't go the way it was supposed to. Daniel shook his head. It went exactly how it should have. Grace met his eyes and smiled, a small, hesitant thing that made something inside him shift. Maybe, she said softly, we could try again sometime. Without the cookies and emergency babysitting? Daniel's smile widened. I'd like that. Lila grinned between them. Can I come too? Grace laughed. Not this time, sweetheart. They stepped out into the cool night, rain now just a mist, and Daniel held the door open for them. Lila waved goodbye with her tiny hand. Bye, Mr. Daniel. Don't forget, kindness is never late. He chuckled, watching them disappear down the street, Grace's hand holding Lila's, their silhouettes framed under a flickering streetlight. For the first time in years, the ache in his chest didn't hurt. It hummed with hope. That night, when Daniel got home, he found a napkin in his coat pocket, folded neatly, written in a soft, looping script. Thank you for waiting. Grace. He smiled. For the first time since losing Emily, he felt like life had whispered again. Not in words, but in laughter, in a child's innocence, in a woman's quiet courage to show up. 2 months later, Daniel walked into the same cafe.